We're here with Jason Taylor of Moab City Council incumbent.
Right.
Trying to get to know you more. I guess out of all the candidates, you're like the last person I just got your phone number when we had to text.
Oh, really?
Like, I'm like Thanos collecting stones. I'm like, oh yes, I finally. You must have good plumbing. That's what I think.
Maybe I do. I don't know.
Well, what era house? What neighborhood do you live in?
So I live in a newer house. It's probably 10 years old. I live by the high school.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess it's funny because I live in it's a little subdivision right before you go into the walking neighborhood.
Kiva Drive or something.
Yeah. I live on Kachina.
Kachina.
Yeah. So, and before that, we bought that house probably about 8 years ago, and then before that, we've had two other houses in town. We were on the west side, down on Gala, down on the Apple streets, and then I lived on Taylor Avenue the first house that I owned, and that was in the late '90s.
Okay.
So,
Taylor. I
Taylor.
mean, this is a famous local name. Are you local, or are you just happen to be local?
So I think that I've talked to the Taylors that have cattle and stuff up on the mountain and stuff like
Chick
that.
Taylor.
And Jick, Don and stuff. And I've talked to them a little bit, and I think we're both from, or I think they said that they're from the Loa Bicknell area, and that's where kind of my relatives are from. Is from Loa Bicknell. My grandparents and stuff lived in Salina and Richfield,
Okay.
so on that side, Sevier Valley.
Yeah.
And then, and then I grew up kind of all over the place. My dad was a bank manager, and so at the time they didn't like to keep managers in one branch very often. So growing up, I lived in Logan, Provo, Richfield, Monroe, Heber, Springville, and then I graduated from high school in Springville, and then moved to Moab after that.
Okay. So whole
I've been all over the
tour.
state. Yeah.
Whole tour of Utah.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah.
I know it's helped me. I know a lot about a lot of places in Utah, or a little bit, enough to get by a little bit. And stuff,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So right before you came over, me and Oscar were saying how, all these debates and what not going on. It's kind of like, I believe in affordable housing, and of course you do.
Yeah,
all of us do.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of like, I kind of want to expand beyond the normal kind of stuff. Why do you believe in affordable housing in terms of I don't know, kind of we all can say that, but what's or is it I need employees?
What makes your views of affordable housing different than other people's views on affordable housing?
Or what's a deep dive into it?
I think for me, everybody's like, oh, I want, affordable housing. But what is affordable housing? I think affordable housing is this whole scale of, depending on where you are, financially or economically, it means different things for different people, and stuff. So, so for me, affordable housing is, I think, it's having housing across all factors, across all segments, that people can get into. That you have people who are single that, that they can get into a house that's, my first house, my wife and I lived in on Taylor. I think it was maybe 1,100 square feet. It was perfect for us. But then as we started, thinking about kids, we needed to kind of change things and kind of moving up into that. But so affordable housing to me is having a variety of houses that meets people's needs, whatever those needs are. And I go back and forth on it, and I've kind of thought a lot about it, and stuff. And what's affordable to one person may not be affordable to another person. And so I think, I'm kind of what we need to do is we need to increase the inventory. We need to increase the spectrum of homes that we have, so that people can, because I think that once you start getting more inventory, the market gets a little bit more competitive to get people into those houses. And in some instances, houses may drop. Those houses that are super nice will probably always stay, expensive, or only reaching that segment market. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. But I think affordable housing, I think for the city, I was like, we need to, I'm pretty apprehensive a little bit to be like, we need to go in and we need to make, these type of housings, we need to demand this type of housing, because we don't know what the ramifications of that are, and we're kind of trying to dictate the market. And I think, and I do somewhat have a little bit of heartburn with dictating the market and saying like, like we're only going to build houses. Even you see it at Arroyo Crossing, a little bit now, is they got the new cottages or whatever that are coming online, and those are some of those are like $1,600 a month. And to me, I'm like, is that affordable? Is that affordable on a river guide wage? Is that affordable on a canyoneering guide wage? And so, or it's like I look at it but I don't know. And I don't know, like, kind of, to me that seems expensive. And so what do we do to get rents down around your rents or monthly payments and stuff down $1,000? You're looking at interest rates. You're looking at what houses are selling for. There's just so many factors that go into it that I don't know that there's this magic bullet for figuring out affordable housing. And I think in a lot of ways, the city, the county and stuff, we're looking at things. We're going like, oh, this is going to help. The AEH ordinance that the city did. I think that was a good ordinance, and for me that ordinance was just getting people, getting locals to at least be able to play. Because for a while there, like when the AEH ordinance was going on and other things were going on, there was outside money that was coming in, and they were just they're buying up these houses. And locals were like, hey, it's going to take me time to get financing, or it's going to take me time to get this going, and money from out of state or out of town is coming in. It's like cash right now, done.
So it's kind of like the government, has a capacity to change and move markets.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're apprehensive about using that power, right? You're like, I don't know if, we're choosing winners and losers instead of being like, well, the winner is whoever has the money.
Right.
Right? So...
Well, I think the winner is whoever can play... I think there's winners for different markets, and there's people who come in, and want to be like... There's developers that come in and be like, hey, we want to build affordable housing. And we should support them, we should encourage them, and stuff. And, but I also, I have a lot of... Sometimes I wonder, are we doing the right thing by saying, nope, no more $1 million houses, or something like that. Are we, or we want...
But we don't really have the power.
No, we don't. We don't. But sometimes I think we do, and that's really concerning to me.
I see it as government can make markets with affordable housing, and that's like some of the things we've done at the county is like making markets, and I just wonder, how do you think about? I guess how do you square that with you're saying you're seeing it as a restriction? What do you see as government as a creation?
I don't necessarily see it as I look at there's people that are going to come in and they're going to create their own markets. I look at the Red Rock Flats. The Red Rock Flats is going on the highway. That's a developer who builds those type of units all over, I think, and stuff. And for them, they came in and they were like, they're like, hey, we see this as a good market in Moab, and they came in, they're building these apartments, which will be coming online in March, I think, of next year. Yeah. And they're filling that need. Yeah. They're filling that need. They are abiding by the AEH ordinance, and you know, but they created this housing themselves because they saw that there's a market for it.
Yeah. It's like you're a Republican, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could what kind of Republican are you? That's why I kind of wanted to back up and be like, how do you see?
I'm not.
How do you see that? You're in Moab. Like, this is
Right.
definitely a different town.
It totally is.
Yeah. So, like, what kind? Are you a Moab Republican? What is it? What is
Well, it depends what you call a Moab Republican. You know, I'm not I'm not MAGA, you know, and stuff. But I believe in property rights. You know, I do believe that we should be, you know, having low taxes, and I worry about taxes, you know, stuff, which I'm sure is a subject you will probably get into, you know, and stuff. I believe in Second Amendment rights, you know, and then I believe that, you know, that we should be, you know, I believe in capitalism to some extent, you know, that we should, that, you know, businesses should be allowed to do things. I believe in, you know, I say property rights. I do believe that people should be allowed to do what they want to do, you know, and have less restrictions on property, you know, and stuff. So that's kind of, but I'm not like,
but there's this thing. So back to housing, there's this thing. I call it a Romney-esque idea of housing. Like, in the county, we had the high density housing ordinance, where it's like we make a market by giving up density,
yes,
but making, like, you know, locals only
right.
markets. And I'm kind of like, man, okay, you know, good idea, right? And so when I see, like, property rights, it's like, I come from Ohio, where my parents still live. There's no zoning. And they're terrified that the cornfield across the street, I mean, not terrified, but it's like, could be a hog farm
right
any day. So, you know, there's all this thing where it's, you know, like zoning, it's this tug of war between your rights and your neighbor's rights. And that's why I just see that local governments have a lot of power. So when I when I hear Republicans in this town be like, well, I believe in property rights. Do you think, like, property rights are, like, under attack in Grand County and Moab, or do you think they're threatened or restricted? Because I see it as a bargaining chip.
I do see it as, I think you're right. It is kind of a bargaining chip, you know, stuff. But I see that, like, you know, like Cane Creek, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think Cane Creek development is a really good example of, you know, like, I am not for Cane Creek. I think I wish that Cane Creek wasn't going to happen for a lot of reasons. You know, the impact it's going to have on Moab and what it's going to do to that area and stuff. But you know, they kind of went back and forth, and they bought that land, you know, under the assumption that they could do this. You know, it was it kind of went back and forth, and finally, you know, even like the county was like, yeah, we can't fight this. You know, it's going to happen. You know, and I think that, you know, for better or worse, those guys bought the property with that right to do what they wanted to do, and it was zoned. It went back and forth on the zoning of it, and I think it's a hard fight to come back in and tell someone, like, no, we don't think you should do this. Mm-hmm. You know,
why is it you think it's like the negatives? Like, why do you say that, you know, maybe it's not the best thing for Moab?
Well, I agree with, like, everybody's on the floodplain thing. My major issue with it is being on, like, the city council, which and being a Moab resident, is they're developing a town that's down Cane Creek, and my big concern or issue with this is name me one other town in Utah or anywhere you can think of where you reach that town through residential streets of another town. Mm-hmm. That's my big issue. Mm-hmm. You know, is that there's this town that's going to be developed down there. There's going to be a lot of traffic heading down that town, and that road and they're literally driving down residential streets in Moab to get to that town. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of people have talked about that or thought about that. And I, you know, and I'm like, this is an issue. You know, you're gonna have trucks. You're gonna have a lot more traffic heading down 5th West, Cane Creek. You know, all these, you know, areas, and then heading towards Cane Creek. You know, what's that going to do to our roads? What's the impact on our roads? What's the impact just with traffic? What's the impact with our kids in this town? And stuff. And to me, that's scary. And I wish that that was going to be discussed more. And maybe it will at some point. And stuff. But to me, that's a major concern. And that road goes down Cane Creek. It gets right next to the cliff. And I'm adamantly opposed of it. There's no way that road can stand up the way it is right now. They're going to have to widen that road, and there is no way in the world I think that should be paid for with taxpayer dollars. That's a huge burden on taxpayers, and there's absolutely, if you want to put in a development down there, you should have to abide by the width roads that it has, that goes down there, and that should not come on anybody in Grand County.
Yeah. So a real personal responsibility aspect to it. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I just, I think there's so much. I have this theory that everybody likes Moab when the time they moved here.
Yeah.
And people that grew up here was, some other time. And I look at that. I used to live on King Creek. I used to be friends with Charlie Nelson. And I'm just kind of like, there's a lot of nostalgia. And there's a lot of, to me, like this idea, like a lot of our tourism is down there. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of part of the experience, right? You go down this kind of country road, used to see the donkeys, and, it's kind of like, people are going to do what they're going to do. But I feel like, here's what I think. I think that Moab, like people in Moab are kind of like, I don't feel like people have a lot of autonomy, like I feel like they think things are out of control. And one thing they have a lot of power on is local issues. Yeah. And so they're going to be upset about that, and have an outsider. I mean, I feel like sometimes we're like an under siege community. We got a town of 5,000 with 30,000 visitors. It creates a big us against them. So I kind of wanted to ask you about
30,000. It's like 2 million.
Well, at a weekend, you could have 30,000. Yeah. It's funny. I've been working in Blanding a lot, and Blanding's population like 3,000. I'm like, oh, Blanding's actually kind of like almost how Moab would actually look. Yeah. Without this influx of people in there. You got all your businesses involved in tourism. I kind of wanted to go into that. I'll throw a bunch at you. One thing is taxes. There was a social contract between Moabites and the government of Moab that we didn't pay taxes on property taxes. And the contract is tourism. I feel like there's a contract where it's like tourism degrades our quality of life, and so the tourists will pay for taxes in return. And so with the tax that was passed, it kind of I can't go to the city of Moab and be like, well, I'm a tax-paying citizen. I want my sidewalk fixed. No, actually, you're not paying anything. The tourists are. But now there's kind of a thing where it's like, well, actually, I am paying taxes on it to the city. So I kind of want to hear what you think. Like you've definitely come off as a candidate like, hey, I've thought deeply about this, and I've flip-flopped my position. And you want to come off as someone very conscientious about this decision. What do you think that contract? Have you noticed a switch with the tax? Is there a rewriting of the social contract between Moab and the city?
No, and I think you got to kind of look back and go. I have spent a lot of time, looking at, and I think that this contract you're talking about, I think is kind of a contract that was promised, to the residents, hey, we're gonna take away this property tax, but that's not even how it went down. Mm-hmm. The way the property tax went down, as far as I know, and I've tried to research this, and there is so little information about the property tax, mm-hmm. and I don't know And but from what I've gathered from what time that I've spent trying to look, and I've spent a lot of time looking at in the early 90s, the mayor and the city council at the time decided that they could get rid of the property tax and they could do a business licensing tax. And so they switched over to this business licensing tax. And this business licensing tax was like taxing or getting a license for, if you're an accountant in Grand County or Moab City, you had to pay like $100 a year or something like that. And then they were about a year, 18 months into it, the state legislature, and then so they said, hey, we're getting rid of property tax, we're going to do this business licensing tax. And I think that it was like hotels, campgrounds, things like that. They thought
but it's one time or reoccurring?
Every year.
Every year. Okay.
Every year they would pay this business licensing tax. And then about 18 months, a year into it, not very far into it, the state legislature said, hey, this business and licensing tax that you guys came up with is illegal. You can't do that. And so
the good people of Moab always.
And so the legislature, is just really good at slapping hands, and things like that. They told Moab City they had to quit doing the business licensing tax, and it was a cool thing. And what happened was, I think, is that other cities and other counties or other cities were like, hey, let's start doing this business licensing tax, and they're like, Moab's doing this, and it kind of started, and then the state legislature was like, no, that's not working, you can't do that. So they got rid of it. At the time, they never implemented the property tax back.
Okay.
And so, and it's pretty interesting. Like, I've looked at it a lot, and stuff, and I've just been kind of looking at it now. It's like, well, it was 1991. Council-wise, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it's a couple paragraphs in a history book.
Right. But you look at it, and we've had 4 mayors since that happened. That's it. And we've had, there's people who come on and off the council and stuff, but we've only had 4 mayors since Tom Stocks, and so a lot has happened during that time, and everything was going on. Kind of, I guess, going back to your question is about the tax. I do think that people, yes, now they do have a footing to come to the city and say, fix my sidewalk, and fix, and I kind of look at this and I go, I've been thinking a lot about this lately. And 2 years ago, you got on social media, Facebook, there was probably a post once a week talking about Cane Creek, how crappy Cane Creek was. When are they going to fix Cane Creek? And stuff. We fixed Cane Creek, nothing on that. And then that was not property tax money. That was CIB money and a loan from the CIB the city is paying back, and some enterprise funds that went to paying that. But we implemented the property tax, and the first thing we did with that property tax was fixed Uranium Avenue and what the other street that's on that and stuff. Mm-hmm. That was the first thing we did, and you remember how bad that street was. Everybody was complaining about that street, and we paid for that whole construction thing with last year's property tax. Mm-hmm. It covered the whole thing. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to take out a loan. We're not paying interest, and stuff. And so, in a way, like what you're saying is what we did. People were complaining about the road. They were complaining about the road. We took that property tax. We put it directly to that road. People can drive on that road. They'll see it every single time they drive down that road. And hopefully they go, yeah, property tax sucked. But we paid for this road. Mm.
Right.
And before the property tax, we'd kind of talked about it. We're like, if we were to, pay for this road ourselves or something, and if we even could get a bond for it, to do it, it was going to take like 11 years to pay that back with no property tax.
Right.
With the funds that are coming in.
And in 11 years, it might need repaved again.
Might need to be repaved again. But also in 11 years, you've also taken, you also can't do anything else. So
you get one road.
Yeah. And I've said this, I've said this a lot. It's like and people have heard me say this, we had no plan to fix roads.
Yeah.
The plan was no plan.
Yeah, it's kind of like, from what I understand, is like we've just been kind of eating our infrastructure.
Yeah.
Without replacing it.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, I deal with the city and the county with the water and sewer stuff, and like, we have old crappy systems that need updated. And it was kind of like, well, it was a Hail Mary to save the town. We kind of put everything on pause. But now, things are different. Money's flowing. And I just, like, there's...
Yeah,
I just drove down Main Street. City Market had empty shelves, and you see a lot of traffic. So
yeah, I've been in City Market like last couple of nights, and it was funny. I was like talking to someone there. I was like, man, this place looks like it got pillaged. So
pillage market.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. I mean, it was 6:00 at night, and shelves were bare, and stuff like that, and so I think that I understand the property tax, and I understand the burden that it puts on a lot of people and stuff. But I also, I also know that if we can't just keep kicking this can down the road,
right?
There's people are like, you're just doing it because you think that it's acceptable because we're the only city in the state that didn't have a property tax. And I'm like, no, I think it's acceptable, or I think it's prudent because. Because we have no plan, and it's going to cost you more if we wait 5-10 years. If we'd have been doing the property tax, if we'd have started it 10 years ago, maybe it wouldn't be as much as it is right now, and stuff. But now we're playing catch up. We are so far behind the ball, and now we have these flooding issues, that are going on, And there's a lot of people saying like, we can get money from the state. We can get money from this. No, we can't. It's like...
the nuts and bolts. It's kind of funny how, like, in some ways, infrastructure ideas, they're kind of boring and benign. But, like, and there's a lot of, like, well, we just get the money from somewhere else. Yeah. But, nuts and bolts is like, if my road in front of my house is dirt, it would create a health problem, and then it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So we gotta pick a line on what to choose.
No, and I got something else to say on that. You want to?
That's what I'm saying. Like, you're a Moab Republican, and you see like the state builds stuff. Like, we need roads, and who else is gonna do it except the city? You said you wanted to add one more thing in there.
So I was gonna add, like. People are like, we can just go out and get the money from other places. I looked into that. I went to I went to state legislature. I asked people. I'm like, how can we get this money? And stuff. And I talked to them a little more. Well, you can apply for this. You can apply for this, and stuff. And even CIB. Like, I went and looked at a bunch of the CIB minutes. From passings where they're giving people money. And a lot of times the CIB board is asking the question is like, well, how much of your how are you guys helping to pay for this?
Right.
And how are you guys going to pay back?
Throwing down on it. Right.
And it was like there was cities that are like, oh, we're dedicating X amount, 30,000 per year from property tax to go to this, and then the CIP's like, oh, yeah, you got some skin in the game.
So they were looking for an X factor.
Yeah, but even like
if you do $1, we'll give you 3 or whatever.
But so like you go to the state and you ask for like, hey, we need money to pave this road or put in this infrastructure. The state's going to ask you, and you're applying for, funding from UDOT or something like that, and they're looking at your needs, and stuff like that. They're going to look at your finances. They are looking at our finances, and they're going to go like, wow, I don't know what some Ogden, Utah is dedicating, $200,000 from property taxes to this project. What's Moab putting in? Well, they don't have a property tax. Well, Moab doesn't have a property tax. What are they coming to the table with? Mm-hmm. What are they coming to the table? So there's just money's getting harder to get, and people, even in the federal government, even the state government, even CIB they're going to start looking and saying like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? Mm-hmm. And it looks bad when Moab doesn't, to the state and to these other entities who are handing out money, when we're the only city in the state that doesn't have a property tax.
I think kind of the issue for like me, my property went up a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
But the kick in the nuts was it's gone up 4 paychecks in 5 years, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it was kind of like, oh, I proudly will give a week to my community, but now it's like a lot.
Well, tell me this, so.
And yeah, poor me, my property value went up. But guess what? I would love if it went down.
Yeah. Well, so I would, exactly, stuff. And I look at this too, and I go like, everybody's harping so much on the city. You guys, and I thought the city, I felt like the city was very transparent. Like, hey, this is coming down the pike. We had articles in the paper. We talked about it. I feel like we didn't, Councilman Topper and I were holding, we were saying, meet us in the park and talk about this. I reached out to people. I went to people's homes. I tried to be very transparent and explain why we need it and stuff. But I was really frustrated, that everybody's just like, the city this, the city that, stuff. And I'm kind of looking at it going like, I know I put this I know that I was part of this property tax, but you can see it. You can see Uranium Avenue. Mm-hmm. You can see that we took this money and we put it to this road. We paved this road, made it nicer. We're going down the list. We're going to start doing all these roads, and stuff that are crap, and they need to be replaced. Yeah. But then it's like, and I'm like, well, and I'm not trying to shift blame to the county and stuff, but the county, there was like, oh, our values went up with the county. The county could have dropped their mill value down, their mill levy. They could have dropped their percentage down when values went up, right? Mm. But they didn't.
Right.
And so, but no one kind of questioned that, and as a city resident, what do you get for your county taxes?
Yeah.
Tell me, if you all these
county employees, right? Which is good. Like I think we need county employees.
What county employees though?
Yeah, planning and zoning. Staff. Mark Tyner.
But that's my question. Is no one can tell me what they're getting for their county taxes.
And taxes is like a dark hole that I understand is complicated.
People are like, I'm getting the sheriff's office. No, that's mostly paid TRT. Mm-hmm. And we're paying for OSTA. That's TRT. Right. So to me, it's like, I get really frustrated. I'm like, hey, we did this. We took this property tax, but you are getting a smooth road to pave on. You're going to see other roads. You're going to get these sidewalks that you can walk down.
You feel like the counties may not be delivering on their stuff.
No, I just feel like I think that they're probably delivering, but no one can tell me. People are like, well, we get schools. No, that's a separate tax. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, well, I get fire protection. Nope, that's a separate tax.
Right.
But so it's like, would you rather your county taxes pay for a road up in Cisco, or you get Uranium Avenue paved with your city taxes?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm not against it. I'm kind of like, okay, yeah,
it's a hard pill to swallow. I totally know.
But it's behind the backdrop of everything else. Mm-hmm. I was kind of like, yeah, man, it's kind of like, yeah, I raised rent on my tenants, and I was like, well, good thing I can. I got, I have 3 roommates, so it's hard too because you got. I always feel like the general public, they have various, they don't know that, you are paying for the school through a school tax and whatnot. So, that's the public is, we serve them.
But I think we need to educate, and I'm very transparent about trying to educate them. It's like, I answer my phone, people call me up. I try to, talk to people about it, and stuff. So I don't have anything to hide, and I'm happy to defend, why I came to the conclusion that I came to.
Do you want to comment on any comments about passing the property tax in a hot summer month when no one was paying attention, and the thing about the the proposition, all that stuff?
Yeah, well, I have heard that people are like, you passed it in July when no one was paying attention. Yeah, I did hear that, and I was like, really? I'm sorry that we're all busy. We're all busy that time. But that's when the city has to pass their budget.
That's
you know.
to me, that's a silly argument. I mean, what month? What
Yeah.
month's the best month?
It's like, oh, you did it
November.
Christmas.
Yeah, you know, you stole from Santa.
We tried to. We tried to get the word out, and I had thought we had done a really good job, and stuff. But people were like, I wasn't paying attention. It's like I don't, unless we had a truck with a big bullhorn going down each street. In
a lot of people are checked out.
You
know, they got different problems. Even me, I was like, oh yeah, okay, like they're doing something, whatever. Right. So, Joette said something interesting to me. She was like, she felt that have you been out canvassing?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Wait, have you noticed a difference this time around?
Yeah, a little bit. That people know who I am this time around.
Okay.
And people I think still have some pretty mixed views about things and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Do you have like a specific question about it?
No, she just was saying how, she was like, well, I saw a lot of empty houses. She brought that up, and I was interested in her story behind that. Like, she was like, oh, well, these are people that moved out of Moab. And I was like, no, I don't necessarily agree with that. It's a story. I just kind of like, what do you see when you canvass? What's something that kind of strikes you when you're talking to people?
There's people are falling into two categories. Either maybe they're so busy with their personal lives that they don't really know what's happening, or they're super engaged. And the people that aren't really kind of like maybe aren't up to speed like on the day-to-day things. They'll be like, oh yeah, and they'll be like, oh, and you'll talk to them for a second. And they'll be like, oh yeah, then there's this, like oh, there's too many trees, or the tumbleweeds down by the bridge on 5th West are out of control. They're trees. And I'm like, yeah, you're right, or, garbage cans, there's a lot of garbage around, and stuff like that. And then you'll have other people who are upset with the property tax. Those other people who are like, I'm upset with the property tax. I didn't want the property tax, but I get it, and I understand it. There's a lot of people who that I've talked to, like, yeah, I moved here. I didn't understand why we didn't have a property tax. I thought it was odd, and stuff. So it didn't really affect me that. I didn't really. It affected me, but not. I could see, that it was missing,
right.
And stuff like that. And there's a lot of people who are concerned about tourism. I think. And just,
why do you think that is?
Because we're all hooked to tourism. I believe that it's like. What's that thing with Kevin Bacon? The five degrees of Kevin Bacon. It's like same thing with Moab. All of us are.
So what's the concern that people are bringing it up?
Well, people are just, like, things are slow. Business is slow. And then a lot of people kind of go into blaming it on timed entry, or blaming it on, the county not advertising, or blaming it on, economic factors because of the current administration. It kind of goes all over the place, and and stuff. But people are concerned. People. You have people who are working in the service industry. Waiting tables and stuff like that, and they're
so
not,
you're hearing stuff from employees, not necessarily a business owner. Do you hear two different things coming from employees versus owners?
No, even owners are kind of saying that things are down, and stuff. But then
do you have something you blame the slowness towards? You talking about the stuff other people blame it on. Do you have a specific?
I don't have anything. One thing that I blame it on. I think it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. I think it's the economy in general. I think people are holding their money close than they ever have before. I think they're cutting back on vacations as a whole. I think that the dollar's super strong, so we're not getting European people. I think that the current administrations, have heard that they've, pissed off Europe, and so Europe's not coming here. Canadians aren't coming here. I think it's the county, letting advertising lapse a little bit, and stuff. I think it's I don't think you can pinpoint one thing and
Right.
say this is the reason why tourism down.
It's-
Las Vegas tourism is
Right.
down, you know?
And it's funny for, I guess I hear a lot of people saying, well, we have too much tourism. Like, we're still up over 10 years ago. And,
Yeah.
like, I guess there's an idea of, like, what's enough tourism? And, like, what do you think? Like, I remember Scott Newton one time said he was like, I'd actually make more money if it was slower. We're almost, like, too busy right now, which was an interesting concept he explained to me about how, he couldn't actually fit enough employees in the building. Moab has this relationship with tourists. We love them, we hate them, we're dependent on them. I hear you. What you're saying is like you've just been hearing. You haven't heard like. No, this is a good direction.
What, the tourism or the truck project or what?
Oh yeah,
what?
tourism like going down. We've gone too far. Like to me, there's a part of me that's like,
I haven't had anyone like knock on the door and they're like, man, this is the greatest summer ever. I can make a left-hand turn. I haven't heard that because I think most people, I have this story.
okay.
And this was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, and I've shared this story before. I was at City Market. And it was it was like the week after Jeep Safari, or a couple of days after Jeep Safari. And it was one of those weekends where there was a ton of people in town. I don't know if it was like a car show or it was right after, something like that. But there was people waiting in line to check out. And there was these two people, and I'm waiting in line. There's these two people in front of me. And I'm like, oh, Susie. And she's like, oh, John. They're like, how you doing? Like, good. I haven't seen you forever, stuff like that. They're like, and they're sitting there kind of talking and stuff. And they're like, can you believe this? There's so many people here. And one of them goes, yeah, this is BS. This is the biggest crock of crap. I can't stand all these people, and stuff. And I was like, whoa, there's too many people here in town. And they're like, yeah. They're like, well, how was your weekend working at Eddie McStiff's? Or what it was. And they're like, I've never made more money than I made this weekend. Mm-hmm. I made bank in tips.
All right.
And I was like sitting there with my milk in one hand and eggs in the other. And I was like, do you not see the correlation between this? Mm-hmm. The reason why you made more money than you've ever made before is because of these lines. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how can you complain about having to wait in line at City Market and then a minute later going, I made so much money last week that, that it was the most money I'd ever made waiting tables and be super stoked on it. Mm-hmm. There's a little give and take, with this, mm-hmm. stuff. And I understand that people are like, oh, we're getting overrun by tourists. I think, in 2020 or 2021 when it was insane, it was insane. Mm-hmm. I will even admit that like in our business, like we couldn't keep up. We had so many people in traveling that it, I think it did deter from the experience. And I think that was, it was insane. Mm-hmm. It was too much.
Yeah, I just will push back and like, I don't think everybody here relies on tourism. We have a lot of retirees.
Really?
Oh, yeah. I mean, on my neighborhood, none of my neighbors here are like relying on tourism. I have a retired neighbor. I have a lineman. I've got an EM, like a guy that works for the hospital, which you could say.
Yeah, you totally could. That's what I'm saying.
But my thing is that
your neighbor here, he relies on tourism.
Yeah,
and he works at the hospital. I
right.
know who he is.
I guess what I'm saying is, I just one thing that I've said this a couple times before. One thing that really changed my mind when I started being a service plumber was how many retirees are there in this town. Mm-hmm. That like they're drawing a pension check and they're just seeing things getting more expensive, and they would not care a bit if no tourists showed up. Like their life would probably be better. They would not have to wait in line for things. Maybe not. But I'm just saying that like I just think that like when I worked in tourism, I thought everybody rode a mountain bike and was vaguely in their 30s. And then I started realizing this town. I was like, actually, there's not. You know, you know, we live in a town where people had a much higher standard of living. They used to live here.
Yeah. So no, and I will absolutely, I will disagree with that.
Yeah.
The lineman that lives across the street from you, if I think I know who it is, he used to drive bus for me and drive people up and down the river road before he became a lineman.
Yeah.
So, you know, he was in the industry. The guy who used to work for the health department, you know, most of his business was checking restaurants, you know, stuff like that.
Right. But that brings up a point that tourism isn't seen as a good job.
No.
Here. It is good to be an owner.
Stone job.
Right. But the stepping stone is tied to housing. Right? It's like when I came to town, it was like, oh man, hey, could you rent out this room? It's like $200. And it was like, well, I'm actually making a lot. So the calculus was like, you could get people here. Oh yeah, I could come, you know, work 2 seasons, bang out a lot of money. I think that calculus has changed. I think that what do we owe our business people? Because I think we have a business class that make money off of a transient population, seasonal workers. And so...
Is there anything wrong with that?
No, but that's the spice. Like so as a community, we're trying to provide housing so that business owners can make a middle class income. Mm-hmm. That's my story about Moab. It's like, okay, so like we're now having to subsidize, because I keep coming down to this with my major thing with housing, and I'm the housing guy.
Yeah.
Is that do we have poor wages, or do we have too expensive housing? Right? You know, I want you to circle that square for me as a business owner. You know, it's like, yeah, hey, we got to make a town functional, but we're almost subsidizing these companies to, like, okay, well, you want density. We can give you density, and supposedly that, I guess what I'm saying is we are sacrificing things about our quality of life to make the business side of Moab work. And I just, you know, I constantly think about, you know, that's changing with housing tripling, price of living going up, you know.
So, like, my business that I manage, you know, I manage a company called Western River Expedition. Yeah. And we provide housing. Mm-hmm. You know, we found that we had to provide housing. And I think by doing that, it's helped us secure a workforce, you know, because we don't have people coming in trying to find housing and then coming to us and saying, I can't work here because I can't find a place to live. It also takes the stress off of the housing in town. You know, we have 110 employees, just, you know, between Western River Expeditions and the Moab Adventure Center. And so about half of those are transient. They're college kids. You know, they don't expect to live here year round. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, I do have 2 of them that have decided to stay year round because they found out that they could go to college here for cheaper than they could other places. So that's good. Yeah. But the other 50, you know, that we have here, they've been able to they're part of the community. You know, a lot of them they're year-round locals here, you know, and stuff. We probably have 8 or 9 drivers that work for us that are retired, you know, police department, you know, UPS drivers, and you know, and other things that they can come and they can subsidize their retirements and do a job they love, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I started out as a river guide. You know, you said you lived down Cane Creek. You know, I lived in Slick Rock Campground for a couple of years in like a 1962 trailer with no air conditioning. Yeah. You know, I lived at Goose Island before it became a campground. You know, and stuff. And those options have changed. Everything has changed. They have, but you know, there's this big emphasis on, like, we need we should have the ability to have housing for people who want to make Moab their year-round place and stuff. However, there's a lot of people who just come in for summer work and then they leave, and that's fine because we don't have winter work. You can't run the river in January. You know, you can't.
For sure.
There's a lot of these things. So it's actually like us providing housing. It's helping the local business markets, and it's helping business. You know, but I think a lot of businesses are in that same. They're in that same place, but they don't have the ability. We're lucky because we were able to do it. You know, we were on river sands for 30 years, you know, and guys were living in single wide trailers, you know, and then we moved south of town. We were able to do something different that's quite a bit better and stuff. But that's our business model, you know, and so, but I think that,
so you're a river company and housing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we have 64 beds. And then we have some other housing, you know, as well.
Jason, what would you say to someone who currently lives in Moab full time, but is struggling? And what would you do as a council member for someone who lives here, but is struggling to afford it and is thinking about moving some like rural place in Colorado or somewhere like close but not Moab? What would you say and do for them? Or just like it could be like a message or it could be an action.
Well, I think like people who Moab, you have to want to live in Moab. You know, I think Moab's one of those places where you have to work to live here. Like you have to work at living here. Does that make sense? Like you have to work at trying to find housing. And I think that
you don't think that's true in other places?
I do. I totally do.
You think it's easier to live like in California or? I mean, California's a big state. I don't know.
I think Jackson Hole. I think it's hard to find a place in Jackson Hole. You know, I think like if you're trying to find a place in, you know, the biggest detriment to Moab is how isolated we are. We don't have bedroom communities.
Yeah.
You know, you can't live at Hoback Junction if you live in Jackson. You can't live in Alpine. You know, and so.
Monticello, you know, is an hour drive. And
LaSalle's 45 minutes, you know, whatever. Yeah. I don't think those are the right bedroom communities for Moab. So Moab is, we're very isolated on what we can offer people just because of, we don't have a lot of land, you know, that we can build on. But I think that if people are here, I think it ebbs and flows. You know, it's like when I was a river guide and didn't have a place to live, I'd have to come down in April and March, you know, or early May, and look at the advertiser and call on places to find a place to live, you know, and stuff. I think that's changing. I think that I'm hoping that within the next year, more housing opens up. You know, with these flats, and it will be easier for people who want to stay to be able to stay. You know, my wife and I talk all the time. We're like, if we were 25, 26 years old, you know, newly married, we wanted to live in Moab, and we pulled into town, we would be here for about 20 minutes and be like, we got to leave. There's no place for us here. We can't afford it. We can't afford it. So I would hope that that when these places come online, that again we have more inventory, that prices become more affordable, and that people can, you know, that we can accommodate those people who want to be here. Yeah. You know, and it's taken a lot to move the needle, you know, and I think that the city's worked really hard.
I think Moab is like a lot of places in Utah are like, yeah, what are they doing in Grand County? Like other places have these housing problems, and I've heard that they're kind of like, yeah, we've been proactive.
We have been proactive, but it's taken us 10 years of beating the drum to get to where we are now, and we're not there yet.
Well, and we've also on the backdrop of an explosion of tourism numbers have exploded, right? You know, things are down, but they're still up.
Well,
right?
Also too, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like things exploded. We had all these hotels coming on.
Housing prices tripled.
And housing prices tripled. Yeah. We had these hotels coming on, you know, and for a while there, like most of the employees were bouncing around. They were going. They'd go work at this hotel, and then this hotel would be like, hey, I'll pay you $1 more. Mm-hmm. So then they go to this hotel, and then there's another hotel that's like, hey, I'll pay you $1.50 more. Mm-hmm. So people, the urgency and the problem escalated because we had such a small workforce that people were literally bidding on employees, and I think that because we didn't have the housing, and stuff. And I'm hoping that I want people to make good wages, and stuff like that, but
yeah, see, that's why I get to this thing where it's like, well, housing just drives down wages, like, and whoever can find the hack to housing with their business. I mean, I applaud like businesses finding their housing, but also I'm like, we had a labor movement that was against the company store, and I'm sure it's complicated. I've heard some employers be like, we don't want to provide housing to our employees. Like, it's legally messy. It's kind of pain in the butt. There's conflicts of interest,
providing housing is horrible.
Yeah. It's not where you would want to be.
It's not where we want. Well, it's not where we want to be, but it also kind of helps us with our business.
Yeah. That's why, this is our best shits off camera. So what I'm getting to is like the classic split between, Republicans are business owners and Democrats are the working people. And I think that idea is blown up. I think the new left and the new right is completely like switched around. And I'm like, what's the lines in Moab anymore? That's why I was like, oh, why are you like, why do you consider yourself like a Republican,
In regards to that, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you are the boss owning class. What I see with Republicanism is they have gone, like Trump has brought in a populist working class agenda. Like he's, courting labor unions. And that's why I'm just like, how do you see yourself as like, is there a populist bone in you, or like, are you just kind of the classic, business owner, small business owner, Chamber of Commerce Republican? Yeah. That's what you're.
Yeah, but I also think too that it, I don't think that like if some big hotel chain comes in and they come in like, hey, we're going to come to Moab, we're going to build this $20 million hotel, and then when we get done with it, like have no plan for employees, or going like.
Well, the idea used to be, we paid our employees enough to be competitive in the local market, and that system just doesn't work. It's failed because we have outside forces on our real estate. Like people can come in. Oh yeah, I'll take a $500,000 house. Yeah. Now that $500,000 house isn't a rental for somebody making $500 a week.
Yeah.
So that's where I see the bind.
However, I do have a little bit of an issue with that, but I also but I also look at that and go, I also look at that and go like, if those people were having to find housing on their own, they would be taking up, more housing.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do think that like I do have a problem with corporations, to some extent coming into these neighborhoods and creating workforce housing in neighborhoods. I think it detracts from the neighborhoods. I think it detracts from the community feel. But like if you're living in,
So you don't like the transient house, the river guide house, right? Right, we got a couple on our street. The yards unkept and the boats in the driveway. Yep. Yeah. So you think that's a detriment?
I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I think it.
We're kind of that house for a while.
I've lived in a lot of those houses for a while.
Yeah.
And I've frequented those houses for a while. And like when I was a guide and not married and stuff, I would, I hung out in those houses and stuff. But those houses, I think it's important that we have community feel, and I feel like it's important that our communities I think a lot of times we lose that community feel, and we've lost that in
funny
in America.
See, I look at those young kids. I'm like, they are they're hanging out more than, my boring middle-aged, somewhat hovering above the poverty line existence. I don't know.
They are, but they're not like. But I know, like when I was living in those houses in town, and stuff. I wasn't hanging out with my neighbors. I didn't know who my neighbors were.
Oh, okay.
My neighbors didn't talk to me.
Uh-huh.
I was. I was this dirty river guy, who lived next door, and would walk out to my truck in my underwear and go to work, and stuff. So I don't know if that's still going on or not, but that's the way it was back in the day, and so I think that that's what community, a lot of people in the community have concerns about. Yeah. They have concerns about. There's a house on the east side of town, that there's quite a few of them on the east side of town, which they're owned by these people, and they just have a revolving door of people coming in and out, and I think that you lose a lot of community feel, but you also have the same thing with VRBOs, Airbnbs, and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I mean, on the circles of crappiness, the nightly rental in a community definitely detracts more than the guide house.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And that's where I'm kind of like, ownership is what I think is a part of community, and it's like, we better think about ownership, because if that's not happening, we're not having communities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's like, if we don't have people who can come in and own homes, they're gonna leave. They're not gonna rent forever. They're gonna go to other places where you can go to Salt Lake and work in Salt Lake and live in other areas that are cheaper. Whether it's like Tooele or whatever, or whatnot. And,
I can make double that I make now in Salt Lake.
Yeah,
but I'd have to live in Salt Lake.
Yeah, there's a trade-off. But so we're losing kids in school. We're losing.
Yeah, you have kids in school,
and kids that, the attendance is going down. From a little bit each year and stuff, just because, families, they either can't find houses here, houses are too expensive,
or people aren't creating families.
Yeah, that could be too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think you kind of touched on something I think is interesting. You talked about, your college. There's this pipeline, I think, where it's like college kid out of school to like permanent resident. We get all these kids come in. Some of them stick around. They figure out ways to make it here. And this is the demographic that aren't having kids. Right. It's too expensive. They're too educated and smart to be like, look around, and there's no economic incentive to have kids. And I think that's at play, and it's going to be at play at more. And I see the politicians here in town being like, this is a big issue, because we have things like, I think about community, schools, churches, and in Moab, it's our activities, right? Like, that's what binds us.
Yeah, for sure.
Social groups, kind of thing. So, I just kind of, my daughter didn't go to school here. This is kind of an unknown thing. It seems like all the parents are really tight. You kind of end up knowing everybody through town with that. Tell you, like, what's your hopes, dreams, fears with your kids, and how do you think it relates to that?
So I have 3 kids. I have 2 daughters and a son. I have a daughter who is in college. And when did you graduate, Oscar?
I'm graduating this year.
This year, okay. So I have a daughter who graduated last year, and she's now going to school at Utah Tech in St. George, and then I have a daughter my son and daughter are seniors this year, and I don't really know. I'm kind of glad that my daughter is in St. George, because she's around a lot of different kids. She has this good group. She just left here like an hour ago. She was on her fall break, and she just drove back to St. George. And she's like, it's pretty boring here, and stuff. And so I'm glad that she left because she's getting experiences outside of Moab. If she decides to come back and once she gets her degree, or not get her degree but come back and work, I'm all for it, stuff. But I think it's hard for kids to, when they graduate from here, I think they should leave, and then be able to come back if the time.
You just don't feel like this perspective here is broad enough, or.
Well, I think it depends on what they want to do, and like my daughter wants to be a school teacher, and so I think if she goes and gets her degree to be a school teacher and wants to come back here and work, I think that she would probably be able to get a job here, and be able to stay here and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Do I know or think she could afford to live here on the school teacher salary? I don't know. Probably not. I don't know.
Or find some affordable housing
or something.
Scheme that we have. That's what I think eventually Moab will be like. The people that run this town will probably just be centered in Arroyo, like there'll be like different villages or whatever pops up.
Yeah,
like,
you absolutely could be right.
Yeah.
Unless we can.
I see it in my town, or in my street. Mountain View has slowly turned since I've moved, 4 houses have become empty, but we got Cane Creek Apartments down the road, which have a lot more local people in them. So I'm like, it's kind of shifting in there.
Well, so what do you think is going to happen to the houses on like your street? Do you foresee them becoming second homes, or who do you think will fill them?
Oh yeah, the people that have bought and moved in, they're like older boomer retirees that like come in for like 3 months or a couple months a year, and it's not worth it. They have enough money.
That drives me bonkers.
They have enough money where it's like, why would I rent it out? At best, they would like to have an ADU and a pool boy, right? And that's cool. But then they learn about some zoning restrictions I have problems with building ADUs and being a primary resident. But that's,
See, and that's like, while I believe that, people should be able to buy homes wherever, and stuff. And, I think that those people are hurting, the local community feel, and stuff. And those are people that are paying 100% of the property taxes.
Oh yeah. And some.
And I think that's a, I think that I've had people call me up.
We can shit talk them because they're not a voting constituency.
No, I don't care if they are.
Right.
Like I had a lady who owns a second house here call me up when we were doing the property tax, and she's like, you don't understand. This is my getaway for my daughter and I. We come down there 3 times a year to mountain bike, and now you are charging a property tax, and I'm like, my answer to her was like, you know what, ma'am, take your 100%, because if I could do 200, I would.
Yeah.
And I would.
Yeah.
I would charge empty homes 200% property tax, and I would take that burden off of the locals that live here.
Yeah.
Because I think that those are the people. They're not shopping at City Market 2 times a week. They're not. Their kids aren't in school. Or they're not contributing to the community. Mm-hmm. They come in with their food from Costco. Yeah. They're here for a weekend and they leave.
I was wondering, is there any lobbying efforts by small towns in Utah to up that property tax on second
I think that it's kind of been dabbled in, but it hasn't really gone anywhere, and I think that like other towns in like Colorado they're really working towards that, and I think that they've had kind of limited success with it. Yeah. But like people having like a vacant house tax,
right.
You don't have it.
Well, we have it. It's just really
it's just really low
because you look on comment sections, they're like, well, they should be taxed more. I'm like, we're doing the max we can.
We're doing the max we can.
It's just not that much.
Absolutely,
it's not a deterrent.
No, and it's like. If you can afford a second home in Moab,
you can probably
pay a little bit more.
$1,000.
And if you can't, sell the house.
Yeah.
Give it to someone.
Oh yeah.
Give it to someone who lives here.
Right. I have no mercy for that.
Yeah.
Talking about stepping in, I mean, I think it's funny this election. It's not like you're running against anybody. There's 3 people running for 2 positions. So it's not like you have opponents on that. I was just wondering, stepping into your second term, do you have like a plan, agendas, things that you're going to push for? Like that's different. Like I'm like, yeah, I am gonna go to the state legislature and I'm gonna like make left-hand turns on Main Street, and like I'm gonna make the beer 6-2.
Yeah.
Do you have it, or do you just kind of like I show up and kind of collaborate with the group? What's
So
your style?
it's like we have plans. So when I got on, when I first got on, I was like, I just want to be a part. I feel like we're missing people on the council who represent families.
Okay.
Because I was the only person who, I looked at it and there was Karen Guzman. She has a daughter. But they were living in Grand Junction. And stuff. But there wasn't really anyone else that had kids in the school here, kids that hang out at the park, and stuff. And I was like, man, we're missing this representation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I kind of fit into that representation. I kind of go like, I got my wife hounding me all the time, like going, you need to fix the pool. You need to, why? What do you mean the pool's closed during these times? You need to fix that. The park sucks, and stuff. So, and I'm connected to that community. So I have people calling me all the time, going like, how come the bathrooms don't work here at the park, stuff. And I can kind of go, yeah, I'm going to get on that, So I kind of feel like I have things that I want to do, I've had things, and I've.
But what you're saying is you're a good touch point for a big part of the community that you think's the backbone.
I think so, and I think so, and I think I, over the years I've got to know a lot of people in town. I've got to, and I've been on a lot of boards, and I see how those boards intersect with government, relations, and stuff, and how we all kind of work together, and how this affects that, stuff. And I think that I bring an interesting. I think I bring a good perspective of, hey, if we do this, it's going to have this effect here. If we do this, it's going to have this effect here, and stuff. Or hey, this is what families want.
All right.
The families, the families don't really care about, whatever festival the Mark is doing. Let's do a festival where we are doing stuff for kids, or let's
the face painting at Swanee Park.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and I was like, we're doing this rap tax, and for me it was like, I was like, we're doing this rap tax. The number one goal for me was the ball fields. Mm-hmm. That's where people hang out. Mm-hmm. You go to the ball fields in June, July, and August. They are packed 4 nights a week or 3 nights a week with people. That's where the locals hang out. That's mm-hmm. where connections are made. Yeah. And I wanted those to be nice. I get super frustrated when I go to the park and I'm like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. It's like, this park is, the bathrooms are terrible, And I go to Blanding. Blanding has awesome ball fields,
Let's talk about the pickleball in Blanding. I've been playing pickleball down there.
You have been?
At 6 a.m. and no one seems to care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, why do we not have pickleball?
Yeah.
Why do we not have
No, that's
things?
A community of older people, not young.
Yeah.
But, people congregate.
Well, and it was like, I guess it was Mike McCurdy when at the meeting where they were talking about the pickleballs of the OSA thing. And, and Mike McCurdy was like, well, I called someone down in Blanding and I said to him, I was like, you got 6 pickleball courts down there. And he goes, if you had to do it again, what would you do differently? And he goes, I built 8, and that's exactly what he said, but like, those are things that we're missing, and those are things that I kind of feel like that I want to bring to the forefront. Mm-hmm. I fought for 4 years to get that house torn down on Mountain View.
Oh, I love that house. It decreases my property value and keeps my taxes lower. Right?
All right. It's going away.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
It's going away.
No, it is a problem. It's attractive nuisance.
And,
it's a tragedy.
And it has taken me 4 years, not me, but like just like kind of push this with all of us pushing. And it's finally on the agenda next week to approve the bid to tear it down. Uh-huh. And so, but that's, but it's like I take a lot of pride and I take a lot of, it means a lot to me when people feel that I'm approachable and they can come up to me and they can say, hey, Jason, it's like, why is the city giving me crap about having a 2x4 in my driveway so I can pull my trailer up and park it next to my house? I'm like, I don't know, that's weird, or something, and let me find out for you, and my job is not to necessarily have an agenda. I have things that I want to get done. But my job, I think, is to for other people to call me up and say, I want this done. Mm-hmm. Or like, I want, can you help me with this? You know, can you help me with people speeding up and down my street? I'm like, yeah, I can make some phone calls.
Yeah.
You know, I can, you know, let me see what I can do. And so I take, I'm very humbled by that. And I like being able to communicate with people, you know, and to work side by side with people and be someone that's approachable.
Yeah.
You know, it's really important to me.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
You know, I just, there's different theories and, you know, how to be a council person or local government, and definitely like you seem to fit, you know, that whole thing is like your niche on things. You're not the, like, I have a 14-point agenda and like,
I have things I want to see done.
Right.
You know, and I can get behind other people's things, you know, and stuff and be like, you know,
you're a collaborator.
Yeah, it's like you want to redo the ball fields. I agree with you 100%. Let's make that happen as a community. Let's make that happen as you know, this is something that benefits all of us. You know, and my thing is like, and going back to tourism, I believe in tourism. I believe tourism is the only industry we have.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You know, however, I believe that there needs to be a balance, and I want the community to feel like they're loved in Moab. You know, and I want the Moab community to feel like we're all in this together, you know. And I think we're doing that, you know. And I think, like, you know, and it's little things like sidewalks. Yeah. You know, I'm the sidewalk guy. You know, I want sidewalks done. I want nice sidewalks. I want nice roads. You know, I want you know, I see people in their electrics, you know, their scooters, you know, because they have a disability and they're going down the road and their groceries are bouncing out and they can't. Yeah. You know, they can't reach over to pick up that city market food, and it's because it's the only way they have to get home. You know. Yeah,
I think about like how government delivers, and one of the things I feel like, you know, we have like it delivers for the least amongst us, and then it needs to deliver for like the people that are, you know, all right. You know, I'm like I said, I'm just kind of hovering like. You know, I got $1,000 in the bank. That's it. You know, no retirement plan. Yeah. And, you know, I think about things like, what can that government, you know, what can the government do for me? You know, I do a lot for our government. I pay a lot. And what can it do for me? And, you know, things that I see concerning me is like power bills blowing up. You know, I wonder about like, boy, it would be good if the city, like, when I saw that position of, like, sustainability director, you know, solar's complicated. I kind of am like, yeah, like, if these power, like, data centers, this is a big story going on, is data centers sucking up power. And I'm like, oh, man, dude, I mean, tax credits went away. At what point are, like, solar panels going to be, I don't know. You know, there's a lot of, like, disinformation on that. I think about government delivering because there's this whole sustainability push. But I don't care about sustainability. I'll burn coal, whatever. I just want to like make sure my power bill doesn't blow up to like $600 a month.
Yeah, I'm.
You know, and that's a real issue. That's a real issue for me. And I'm like, yeah, it'd be kind of cool if like the government would help. And I don't know if that's in the wheelhouse. I just try to think about like what concerns me around here. You know, like I'm not handicapped, but yeah, the sidewalks fix. You know, the roads fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think like going like looking at that, like I agree to some extent. Like, you know what you're saying. You know, it's like sustainability. You know, when I got on the council, like there was this goal to become that the whole city vehicles were becoming electrified. Yeah. I'm like, that's insane. Yeah. Like why? You know, unless something changes, you know, with the technology in the next 10, 15 years, it is not cost effective for the city to become driving all electric cars. All right. Even
now, if you were like that electric car, you'll never go to a gas station again. You'll be saving money. Oh yeah. Like to me, I'm like, I can't afford sustainability right now.
No, I can't.
I can afford. I'm like, oh, if I have an EV car and it saves me $1,000 a month, yeah. Oh, and it saves the environment. Okay, sure, yeah, whatever.
Well, you know, like look at the city. Like, there's some things where I'm like, you know, the sustainability. We just signed a contract to get all the streetlights changed to LEDs,
yeah.
You know, and stuff. And the cost savings on that, it's like, oh, we're spending X amount of money to get this done. However, I can't remember what the cost was. However, these LED lights last 25, years or whatever it is, and it saves us $18,000 or $20,000 a year. I can, if I can look at that and go like, okay, we spend $100,000 here. These lights last 25 years. Yeah, it makes sense to change these to LEDs.
Right.
This is a cost saving for residents. It's better light. So yeah, I can get behind that.
Right. I think it's hard to offer these cost saving things while it's costing money and taxes are going up. That's the hard thing. It's like, I'm like, but my power bill went up too.
Right.
I'm saying, I think that's, we're at a hard point where inflation and stuff is just,
inflation's insane.
Yeah.
And the city's not exempt from inflation.
Right.
So it's like
does the city have a power bill? Like that's what I always wondered.
Yeah, they totally do. I can tell you what it is off the top of my
head.
I
just always wondered.
They have a power. Yeah, we totally.
Yeah,
have
I never
bill.
thought about it. It's like,
and it's funny is like when we've done this thing, like we kind of did this, this evaluation of all the light poles, and Rocky Mountain Power is like, well, this light pole, we don't know who's paying for it, and
how do we get more of those?
Yeah, I know exactly. I'm like, why can't we make all of those? So or throw a clothes hanger around the power line and just tap it in like in India or something, But I think I lost my train of thought, but I think we need to do things. We need to do things that are cost saving and not do like I was against the solar panels that we just put on the pool. Stuff. I was like, why?
Yeah.
We haven't paid the old ones off.
Oh, okay.
Why are we putting new ones on?
Yeah.
And the cost savings doesn't pencil out.
Mm-hmm.
Under sustainability. I go, there's some things that do pencil out.
Like we're not affording sustainability right now.
No.
That's my
sustainability is not a luxury at this point, unless it pencils out. And there's some things that do pencil out and some things that won't. And I think that we need to look at it item by item and go, oh yeah, this works. This is going to work for the community. This is not going to work for the community, even though it doesn't have that feel good thing about it. We still got to look at it because the burden will come back on the taxpayer, and that's very real.
Yeah, it is a little touchy with the, like we were just saying. You've picked up, you have that R next to your name. You're running an election where the libs are triggered. We all hate Trump. Trump.
Yeah.
And it's a nonpartisan race. But come on, that's BS. We all know each other. Right. We all know who's what. And so you were saying you feel like the Republicans are doing some soul searching, and the Democrats you've got warmed up a little bit. I saw you at Mary's place, and I saw you at
I went to, because they asked me to come, and I kind of, to go back like to when I first decided to run, for my first term, and the first time I ran, it was ranked choice voting. And there was, like 6 of us, I think that were running, and then there was like 5 people. Was it 5 people running for mayor or something? I can't remember, so there's a bunch of people running for mayor as well, and so I'm gonna run for city council, and I started running, and I told everybody I was gonna run, and I started kind of doing my thing, and I quickly felt like I was left out. The Dems came out and they endorsed, they endorsed Joette, they endorsed Luke. I can't remember, Josie Kovash was running at the time, and I can't remember who else and stuff. And then the Republicans were silent, just nothing, and stuff. And I don't know if I think maybe they were probably pushing like Kent Green for mayor, or whatnot and stuff. But
you weren't being necessarily supported.
Not at all. Zero.
By either side.
Mm-hmm. And I was like, and I was, I'd kind of go home at night and be like, see all these social media things of people pushing things, and no one pushed me, or like from a party point of view. And so after it was all kind of said and done, or we kind of got into it. Like I went to someone who's on the Republican Party, and I said, "Hey, how come you guys aren't pushed
no love for Jason?
No love, yeah. Like nothing, like not even like not even like a Facebook post or anything. It was just silent, and then when like this big mailer came out and it had who to support for the Dems, the Democrats are super organized. Holy cow, they are good, like they are way organized in getting the word out to people, and stuff. And so when that was all, after the election was over, I was like, how come like you guys came out and you endorsed this person. I go, but no one even like, and they're like, well, we kind of had this interview. I'm like, you didn't invite me to the interview.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't know where I stand on this stuff. It was just because I had an R by my name, or because you perceived that I was a Republican, and that like you just assumed that you didn't want me in there, and I was kind of offended by that, and I was kind of, and then I kind of heard like the Republicans were like, well, we thought that if we endorsed you, it would hurt you or something like that. And I'm like, whatever. I was just kind of like, and so, but I kind of made a kind of this big stink, not a big stink about it this year or that during it. I was like, man, I'm kind of offended that these two major parties, they didn't interview people. They didn't ask people, like ask me what you think about this, and then if you come back and you're like, hey, we're not going to endorse you because we didn't like what you said here, I could be like, oh, okay, Yeah. And it was pretty well known that, like I, and a lot of the time was like, there's a lot of misinformation going around that, like that, I owned a UTD business, which I didn't, or I'm pro motors, which I am, and stuff. I own a Jeep rental business, and there was a place for everything. And so, when it came around this time, the Democratic Party reached out and said, hey, we'd like to talk to you about this, because you said this last time and stuff, and we'd like to invite you to come and talk to our group. So I went and talked to them, and talked to their board, I guess it was, and stuff. And they asked me questions for like a good half hour. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I think I didn't really 100% fit the mold, but I think in the end, most people thought that I did a pretty good job, and so they were like, yeah, you're a pretty good guy, and stuff. And I appreciate that. I just want to be a good guy. I just want to listen. I want to be able to explain to people why I vote the way I do. And once people have the right information, they can either like me or not like me.
In this race, how much do you see yourself as aligning with Joette, as you're both the only incumbents in the race?
I think Joette's great. And I think that, it's kind of funny. Like I probably came across as this right, councilman, and she probably came in as like this, this left, mayor, and stuff. And I think that like between the two of us, we have a really good working relationship. We talk a lot. Joy talks to all the council people a lot. I think she's really good at getting lots of different views and lots of different viewpoints, and then kind of directing staff according to those viewpoints and according to what's going on. A lot of what we do just comes down the pike. It's like, we got this coming up, and stuff, and we gotta make a decision on it, and stuff. But I think when we're doing our strategic planning, I think that there's a lot of conversation, and Joette does a really good job. Joette has really united the city staff, and I think that she's really created a good working relationship with fellow counselors. I think all of us as counselors, we get along really well. I got along with all the old councilmen, like with Kaylin, Ronnie, and we all got along really well, and stuff. And so I think.
But you also, when politicians get along, I get nervous.
Right? No,
what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think that like I'm still not afraid to voice my opinion and say like I don't agree with this and stuff when it comes right. But also I can also go to anyone on that council and say like, hey, we got this thing coming up. This is my concerns with it, and and it's respectful. It's a respectful dialogue, you know. And I think that we can agree to disagree.
Yeah.
And I really take that to heart. You know, it's like you know, Colin and I we'll disagree. We'll butt heads. You know, he'll call me up and be like, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And I'll tell him. He's like, "Well, I don't really agree with that." I'm like, "All right, let's go ride mountain bikes." You know, you know, and we get along fine. And I think that that's what it's all about. And I think that we all come at things from different views.
So you kind of talking about your relationship with the Democrats in this. So how is your relationship with the Republicans on this?
I don't really have.
So are you getting feedback from, like you were like, yeah, both were kind of absent. Now you're getting feedback from the Democrats. You work with a lot of Democrats. How do you think the Republican Party?
So the Republican Party told me that they wouldn't endorse me because I voted for the property tax. Uh-huh. And I was like, well, can I explain myself? And there's like, no, there's no reason for you to explain yourself.
And yet you stood up at the last Republican convention and kind of gave your piece still.
I did. I'm not. As much as hard as a decision as it was, I stand by that decision. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's like I didn't make it. I didn't make it because everybody was agreeing with that, you know, and stuff. And people were coming up to me and they were saying like, you could have voted no, it still would have passed, and you would have saved face. Mm-hmm. But I knew that wasn't right.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew that wasn't right. I knew that I knew what I knew at the time, you know, and I think that.
So you're principled, yeah. So you feel you're like, if you're John Curtis or Mike Lee, which one are you?
John Curtis, 100%, 100%.
Easiest question.
Right.
Well,
That's
you know, but I know Mike Lee. I know Mike Lee's staff.
Yeah.
You know, I went to breakfast with his chief of staff a month ago, and I sat down with him and we had breakfast, and then you know who walked in right after was Lynn Jackson. You know, and Lynn Jackson met with him and stuff. So you know, it's like I'm not anti-Mike Lee. We don't see things maybe probably eye to eye on a certain level. I like John Curtis. I think John Curtis is a good guy. I talked to John Curtis about the property tax. I talked to, you know,
so you're just coming across as that real disagree better, Cox kind of like in line of like reasonable Republican that's going to have civil debates. I feel like I'm coming. I mean, of all the people I've talked. Of all the candidates and stuff, you're the one I least knew. Like I said, you're the only one I didn't have the phone number for, and that's just kind of how you're coming across. And just to kind of start wrapping things up floor's yours. You got questions? You got comments?
No.
Are you into do you have a weird postage stamp collection? I don't know. Like
anything you want to say to make yourself more personable?
You know, like.
No, I think I'm kind of like this. People don't really know. You know, I'm like I'm me, you know. It's like I'm a family guy, you know. That I ride bikes a lot. I don't know about Peter Griffin, but
Stan Smith.
Yeah, you know. But I love riding bikes.
Yeah.
You know, I love going to concerts. You know, I'm a.
So you're mixed recreationalist. You have motors and.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. That's why I think I get out of towners will come in and go, oh, I bet you hate those Jeeps. And I was like, I used to ride motorcycles and I'm a mountain biker. I just can't afford the hospital bills of motorcycles, you know?
That's exactly how I am.
I think most motorbikes are like, yeah, I don't know. I go out. I'm not a climber, but I have friends that'll be like, haul me up. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not an e-biker. I'm still riding a pedal bike. But, you know,
people have asked me, are you Mormon?
I am.
You are Mormon. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're more like the Moab Mormon. Like I could drink a beer with you, Mormon, or what?
Yeah, you know, I don't drink. But, you know, it's funny. Like when I first moved to town, you know, I didn't know a whole lot of people, but I rode dirt bikes. I was into jeeping, you know, and stuff, and all my friends were like. People who did the same thing, but they were all in AA, you know, and stuff. But I hang out with them because they're like, oh, I didn't want to drink, you know, I don't go to the bar and stuff. Yeah. And we just hang out.
That's funny. That's a whole different community that you don't even like really mention. in this interview.
Well, no, not really, because it's not. It's who I am, but it's not like.
But they're an
I have like
institution.
those values,
Yeah.
and
That's a big institution. In
yeah.
Well, because you guys spent the whole time talking about taxes. That's what it is.
Yeah, geez, you're we need to come back and do it again. We talk about, like I went on a Mormon mission. You know, I came from the Wasatch Front. You know, and stuff. It's like I.
You almost sound hesitant to like embrace this.
No, I don't, because it's I'm not hesitant, but it's like it's
non-relevant.
It's really it's valuable to me. You know, it's like but I'm just kind of like, I don't want people to be like I'm going to vote for him because he's Mormon, you know, or I'm not going to vote for him because he's Mormon, you know, and stuff like that. Yeah. I want people to vote for me because of who I am and my values and what I stand for, you know, and stuff, which I guess those things kind of play into that.
Right. I was like,
you know,
a lot of people take their values from their religion, but you don't necessarily see that as much. Are you like, or I don't know.
I've heard a lot of what you're saying is values that are not necessarily like the values you've spoken out about the last hour. I don't necessarily pertain to the fact that you're LDS, and I think that's what you're trying to get across, is that the values you're trying to tell us about and through campaigning are not just because you're Mormon.
No, they're just my core value. I think that we we're all in this together. We're all trying to make it through this world. You know, there's things that we want. We want clean parks. You know, we want green grass at the park so our kids can play on it. We want the pool to not be falling down. Yeah. You know, I think
balanced budget.
We need to be
makes sense.
We need to be conservative, but we need to also spend money and not let the pool get to where it's at now, where it's going to cost us $2 or $3 million to fix to get it back up to par. Yeah. You know, and
we want pools.
We want pools. You know, people are like, "What are you going to cut?" I'm like, "I don't know. Should we cut lifeguards? You know, should we cut street sweepers?
Teenagers.
You know, should we? You know, like where do we cut? We're pretty tight. Do we cut the victim's advocate who comes to your house when you've had this horrible experience and to help you get through it? Is that what we cut?
Right.
You know, what are the essential services that we cut to appease people? You know, because if I ask you and I ask Oscar, you might tell me two different things. You know, and you're like, "Hey, I don't walk on sidewalks." You know, but you still see the value in it. So I think that, you know, I want to be known as the person who, you know, like you were talking about, like Spencer Cox, disagree better, you know, or something like that. He said something the other day that really resonated, like, with me, you know, and I you know, and it had to do with like the Charlie Kirk thing, you know, and stuff. And it was I think it was on Good Morning America.
Ezra Klein or
what's that?
Ezra Klein, New York Times, or Good Morning?
No, it was like he was on Sunday Morning or something, one of those shoes, and he goes, we can either be architects or arsonists. And I that stuck with me ever since he said that. And I was like, I want to be an architect. I want to be the architect of people having good, safe place to live. You know, where they're proud of their streets. I don't want to burn anything down. I don't want to burn what we have down. And I think sometimes
you believe in good governance. You believe government has a role.
I do.
And has capacity. That's what I hear. Yeah. So,
one more thing before you guys shake hands and say goodbye. If you're Spencer Cox in the disagree better scenario of Moab, does that make Colin Topper Jared Polis?
That's too nerdy.
I don't even know who that is.
Governor of Colorado.
They did ads together, right? Yeah, they did ads together. You know, I think like we have a council that represents so many diverse backgrounds, you know, and you have Caitlin, who's amazing. You know, I think Caitlin is a super smart lady. She's great. You know, Colin. Colin and I can be totally honest and frank with each other. We disagree a lot, but we also get along really well with each other, you know, and stuff. And we kid around with each other a lot, you know. Like there's things that would concern us. Like we have a game called Find the Street Sweeper, you know, because we joke around that we never see the street sweeper. So when we see it, we take pictures of it and send it to each other, you know, and stuff. You know, Tawny does a really good job of representing the older community and the retired community, and she brings things to the table. I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. That's valid. That is absolutely 100% valid, you know. And Luke was amazing. Luke, I'm gonna miss Luke. And I hope I get back on. So it's but like Luke is detail oriented. He stops and he thinks about what he says. Everything he says, you're like, oh yeah, Luke is just an incredibly smart person. And I think Joette is excellent. And I hope that I hope she stays on. I'm kind of like, even if I don't get back on again, which I hope I do. I hope that Joette does a good. She's good at steering the ship, and she's a good captain. And I've never seen the city, as content as it was. However, we haven't had a lot of things come up like previous mayors have. They've had
COVID,
yeah. Gabby Petito, heavy things, heavy, hard things, and knock on wood, we've been able to concentrate on Moab people and Moab City without being distracted from the sidelines.
Any last hot takes then?
No, I just hope I get back on. I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I'd love to come back, do it again. This is a cool little thing you have going on.
Yeah. It's my producer Oscar and all that.
You want to shake hands?
Now I'd be on Oscar's radio show, play music.